Are you looking for a way to make a real difference in mental health? Thank You Life is here to help. They are a nonprofit dedicated to making evidence based mental health therapies accessible to those who need it most. At Thank You Life, they provide financial assistance for ketamine assisted psychotherapy, helping individuals struggling with treatment resistant depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Their mission is to eliminate financial barriers to these life changing treatments and ensure everyone has the opportunity to heal. And the results speak for themselves. Their data shows that the average beneficiary experiences a 55% reduction in symptoms, which is on par with the broader ketamine research that we see. If you're in private practice or own a business and want to learn more about how you can help your local community, connect with them today, thankyoulife.org, or email them at partnerships@thankyoulife.org. Again, that's thankyoulife.org, or email them partnerships@thankyoulife.org. Thank You Life, healing through accessibility. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1045. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice that you absolutely love. We're now doing this 7 days a week. We've had some sponsors come on. We've got just so many interviews and content and things that really matter to you and to us and to build that thriving private practice you absolutely love. So really excited about that. And actually, so it's funny. I was just yesterday talking with my partner Claire about press releases, and she is the head of communications for a local land conservancy. So they protect hundreds of thousands of acres of land, and she does press releases all the time. And this was like 2 days before our 1,000th episode that we were talking, and I said, like, should we probably do a press release about the 1,000th episode? And she's like, yeah, like probably like a month ago. It's 2 days before. Like, no, we're not going to be able to do anything right now. And so, we were talking press releases, and that's something that's not really been top of mind for me. And then today, I saw in my calendar that we have Mickie Kennedy, who is an expert at helping small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility through Tier 1 press release distribution, which I thought was amazing that, just how this all lined up. So Mickie founded e-releases 25 years ago after realizing that small businesses desperately need a press release distribution service they can actually afford, giving them access to the media and a national newswire, all with a personal touch. Mickie, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we'll get into press releases, but I want to hear, how did you get into press releases? How did this, was this something that, ever since you were a young person, you're like, I'm going to be a press release king? Or was it just something that kind of crept up? How did that start for you?
So I guess it was a fortunate accident. I finished a Master's of Fine Arts in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry. And my career plan was to wait tables.
So big money. So you were thinking like big money, huh?
Right. I was going to wait tables and write poetry. And so I did that after graduating for a summer. And I just realized at the end of the summer, my back hurt, my ankles hurt. I just felt so zapped at the end of these shifts, being 10 hours on concrete. I just realized I needed a safe office job. So I sent my resume out to a bunch of places, and I got hired at a telecom research startup as employee number 3. And because I had writing on my resume, they decided I was going to write press releases and figure out how to make press releases work for them. And so I did that. We published telecom data, numbers, and statistics. We were the only provider of it because we had an arrangement with the ITU in which they used to do it, but then they didn't have the bandwidth or money to do it, so they wanted to tap someone to do it, and so they tapped us. And so we had this great data, but just sending out data, we weren't getting picked up. So I was faxing these press releases, and nothing was happening. And I just sort of explored, people in our industry and other telecom writers and what they were writing about, and realized that while they included data, they were working on a story, and there had to be a story arc. And so I, looked at our data and tried to find anomalies. We had data on Caribbean countries, and what was interesting is one country accounted for more telecom traffic to and from the United States at the time than any of the other countries combined. And so I looked into that, and it was because it was the center for 1-900 numbers, which were very popular at the time. Everything from people calling horoscopes to make a friend, or just all kinds of different activities and things like that. And so I put that together in a press release, and boom, we got picked up in the Financial Times, Economist, and the Wall Street Journal. And so I just continued to, pour through our data, find anomalies, figure out what was probably going on there and why. And the media loved it. And all of a sudden, we would get lots of phone calls with leads and orders. And we mostly sold to the telecom industry when I was there and just started. But all of a sudden, we were selling to hedge funds and investment bankers and all different other types of people, because it was pretty apparent as these stories were coming out that changes in telecom traffic to and from the United States, as well as other different patterns, could be like a major indicator of economic growth in countries before that growth took place. And so all of a sudden, we were hot and our data was really important, and we were getting picked up all the time. And so I had mentioned to my boss, this was a startup that, why aren't other people using press releases? This is so awesome. And he says, I don't know. And around the same time, journalists started to call and say, instead of faxing, could we start emailing? And so, email so much easier than faxing. I just started collecting journalists, and in my evenings and weekends, in spare time, which wasn't considerable working for a startup, I just networked with journalists and asked if I could send them press releases on their beat and industry. And so after a year, I had like 10,000 journalists in a database. And I just started playing matchmaker, sort of just on the side in the beginning. But after a while, it became apparent that this was a business. And I sort of left that company and focused on, writing and sending out releases for my clients. And we still do that. The big difference is that over a decade ago, PR Newswire approached us and said that they liked what we were doing, and would we want to include a Newswire distribution. And, our price points were just a few $100s at the time. And so I told them I didn't think it was going to work. They charge $1,600 today to send a national press release of 600 words. So, that we went back and forth, and they tried to give me like maybe a local distribution for all of my clients. And I really pushed them. And finally they relented and said, okay, we'll give you a national distribution for each of your clients at a price that we could afford. We were no longer, $200, but we're still like, probably a third of the price of what the Newswire would charge to go out nationally. And so it's just been really great to be able to give that access to my clients, as well as other types of email distribution on top of that, and other types of opportunities. So that's been my journey. I've been doing it for since 1998, so over 25 years. And today we move like anywhere from 10,000 to 12,000 releases a year. And so I get to see a lot of releases that work, and unfortunately a lot more releases that don't work. So I definitely am out there educating people on what I see as trends and the types of releases that are more meaningful and more likely to get picked up.
Yeah, and I definitely want to dig into what's likely to get picked up. I'm sure over the years you've seen things shift, as the internet and especially news has become more and more decentralized. When you think about, like, for me, I think about like Haro, Help a Reporter Out, or now it's Connectively, as ways to connect kind of journalists and creators together. What are your thoughts in regards to take a typical solo practice? So that it might be, a clinician, they may have an assistant that has, 5 or 10 hours a week. Maybe they have a really small budget, if anything, for any sort of press release, and they're mostly trying to get local referrals into their counseling practice. How should they be thinking about press releases? How should they be thinking about strategy, connecting with local media? what would we want them to be thinking through when they're mostly local and they're a smaller size practice?
Right. So I think for people like that, you're much better off focusing and targeting local media. And that's something that you would not need to do through a service like mine or a Newswire. If you think about it, and just look around, there's probably less than 10 people in your market that would write about you. And it might even be smaller. In a lot of smaller markets, it might be just as few as four. You know, do research, look at your local paper, uh, you know, who covers, articles that, might include your services. There might be one person who focuses more on, business wellness and things along those lines. So that might be a separate person from someone who is more about individual uh, therapy, that they write about those types of things. So, build your little Rolodex, just the same way I did. And then look around at other media opportunities in your area. Are there business magazines or business newspaper? Again, who there would probably, cover your industry. If you don't know, you can always call. And also, if you can't find an email address online, you can always just call and ask. A lot of people really get the impression that journalists are like celebrities and you can't just ask for their email address, but they're really members of the community. They're reporters, they're writers. And so they should be very willing to give out their email address, especially if you tell them you want to occasionally pitch them ideas that you feel would be really relevant. Um, you might always have some people who have a particular flow style that they prefer, like, maybe DM me on Instagram or Twitter or something. But for most people, it will be email. The other thing that I think would work really well is to, look at other opportunities. There's also like weekly papers in different communities that people give out. Those could be opportunities as well. I've had a lot of people in local markets actually get like columns in those weekly papers.
Yeah.
I
I
wouldn't do
ended up getting one of those in the local paper too. I got a monthly column, but people thought it was weekly.
Right. So that's the thing I always suggest is do not commit to a weekly. Yeah, even though they might be a weekly, say you would feel more comfortable doing a monthly column. And that makes it so much better for you and allows you to focus on really just providing some good content, 10 to 12 times a year, depending on, their scheduling and things like that. And there's lots of different things you can talk about, maybe a column where it talks about coping with stress and anxiety. Maybe you could even bring some resources like meditation apps in there or something like that. But these types of columns are going to make you stand out as a community expert. And usually, in addition to a byline, you might get a sentence at the end of the article that talks about you and your practice. Maybe have a, a link to your website. And, you could also have columns on, building healthy relationships, there's so many different things, self-care, focusing on life transitions. As, summer approaches and there's more weddings, you can talk about, the stressors around that and the transitions and how to go into a marriage happily, as well as for those who are married, some things that could help them be refreshers. There's so many opportunities for a column like that. And I do believe that, your local, your daily paper, or as well as these local papers are good opportunities for you to get started and do something like that. Sometimes you can start on the weekly, and after you've done it for a while and you're really good, you can use that and perhaps try to get an opportunity in the daily paper. Our daily paper is the Baltimore Sun, so I think it'd be kind of difficult to stand out and sort of get a column there. But I think in a lot of other markets that are much smaller than that, it certainly is something that's available. There also could be opportunities with radio and TV as well. So again, pay attention to segments that are on the radio. And if you hear one that like occasionally talks about different topics and you feel like mental health is one that you could do, or maybe you want to get on there and talk about a particular subject, just call and again, ask for that person's email address, and you're asking for the producer or booker of that segment you heard. And again, these people should be willing to give it. And, they might be like at first, what do you need it for? And say, I want to occasionally pitch this person. I have some ideas that I feel would be perfect based on some things that I've listened to in the past. And I think that for local, it's just that. And you might find nothing happens the first 6 months. A lot of times I tell people that you're just laying the groundwork and you're networking. And so I tell people to try to pitch these people at least quarterly. And so, 6 months in, you probably sent each of these people a couple of emails. Maybe you haven't heard back from them. But usually after that, I find you start to get a little bit of traction where you send these emails and you get somebody who wants to dialogue and talk a little bit more. Sometimes you'll find that you're just working and all of a sudden you get an email from one of these contacts that says, "Hey, I'm working on this story and I remembered you've pitched me in the past. And I thought, hey, you might be a good person to go to and get a quote about this particular topic." And boom, that's an opportunity for you to get a great quote and mention in an article. I do want to tell people that quotes are probably one of the biggest missed opportunities for people. Journalists are looking for great quotes. And what a great quote is, it could be the beauty of which you said something, and me being, a poetry background, that means something differently. But for most people, it just means saying something that is so precise or powerful, or you've you've paraphrased it so strongly that the journalist has nothing to do but to use it, because if they paraphrased it, it wouldn't sound as strong. You've got it as condensed and tight and powerful as can be. So spend a little time on a quote. So many quotes are throwaways. And that's the biggest mistake I see my clients do. They send a mediocre press release and then they put a weak quote in it. And yet, if a journalist was looking at two mediocre press releases and considering which one to go with, and one had an amazing strong quote, they would 100% go for that every time, because they know that they can do the heavy lifting and build the story around that quote. And so, never underestimate a strong quote and a strong lead. And when you're pitching these journalists, you're not having to write a press release. It's just a few sentences. Do feel free to put an amazing quote in there, because again, if you put a really great quote and a few sentences talking about that pitch of a story, the journalist can kind of envision what that article would look like. And again, you've done the hard part by giving them an amazing quote, and so they're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting and try to bring a story together for you. And that being said, journalists do follow a story arc. Do try to give them elements to build out a story. Everything from your origin story, what brought you to therapy and to this line of this vocation, and as well as maybe sharing some of your personal vulnerabilities or obstacles or something that's inspirational along the way, because journalists do recognize that one of the best things you can do in a story is immediately humanize someone and bring a human interest element. It's the same reason I think that every time someone appears on Shark Tank, the first thing they talk about is, their origin story, what happened for them to create this company or this brand or this business or product. It's like, hey, I lost my spouse, or my father died and we used to have this hobby and I thought, maybe I could turn that into a business. And that really gets us like, wow, we're really getting invested in this person and really wanting to learn more and hope that it's a great product and a great thing that we can sort of root behind them.
Well, it's like that immediate empathy, and I think good storytelling, they say save the cat early on, where the main character does something that shows that humanity and also has that vulnerability. It's probably why Disney kills off parents in the first scene in every single film. One thing as you were talking that I was thinking about is whenever I received someone's cell phone number, as a journalist or whoever was interviewing me, I would say them as their name, but then I would also put media in their name so I could quickly find them. And one thing that I would do is just like once or twice a year would just send them a brief text, and it could be email, it could be a Instagram DM, like however you want to follow up with people. But to just say, if you ever have a story you're working on and you need just a quick quote on something, psychological, and I kind of would give them a list of the areas of expertise. I know that you often have quick turnaround times and you need something to fill out that article. Just let me know. Feel free to text me on my personal cell phone number, and I'm happy to try to get you a quick quote if you need something, if you have a tight deadline. And I bet 3 or 4 times people would say, oh my gosh, this Valentine's Day like article, just an interview fell through. Can I just have like 3 tips for, people that are alone on Valentine's Day and how to deal with things, or something like along those lines. And it's interesting how when you bail out someone in the media and you're available, how you just move to the top of their list. Have you found that to be true, or do you have other kind of hacks on how you keep up with different media folks?
I find exactly what you said, that when you help someone out, they remember it. And it's sort of like I tell people, you're putting money in a bank that you can withdraw later. And um, sometimes I recommend people who come across a really good idea or a pitch, but they're like, I don't see how I am a good example for this pitch, but I see this trending in other markets, and I just feel like I should let my local media know. I say, by all means, do it, because they're going to appreciate it. That you're letting them be aware of that this is trending strongly in your industry, or a tangential industry, and just say, hey, I probably am not the best person to talk about this, but I thought that you would want to know about it because it seems to be really hot right now, and I know that you cover that market or industry. And again, it's they'll appreciate it. Also, if you ever read an article in your industry that they've written and you really liked it, be specific and just say, I really love that article. I liked how you pointed out this and this. So many people sort of take that for granted. Oh my God, that's probably the only pat on their back that they're going to get specifically about that article. And we do like to be appreciated for what we write. So you don't underestimate how appreciative people are when a genuine compliment comes through. And I think that that's also a really great thing to do.
I am so excited about Alma. When I had my private practice, I struggled building my caseload, attracting the right clients, managing the business side. And honestly, one of the reasons I didn't take insurance was it was so difficult to navigate. So many of my consulting clients deal with these problems as well. And Alma supports clinicians in building rewarding private practices with simplified insurance credentialing in under 45 days, enhanced reimbursement rates, and guaranteed 2-week payback, plus a free profile in their searchable, filterable directory, making it easy for clients who are the right fit for your practice to find you. Learn more about how Alma could support your private practice at helloalma.com/Joe. That's hello, ALMA.com/Joe to learn more. So will you break down for us what a good press release has? Like, what are the elements? How do you get kind of past the gatekeepers? What goes into a good press release?
So I think for a good press release, it is the story. What is it that you're announcing? And there are ways in which what you're announcing is important to you, but it may not be important to a journalist. And by important to a journalist is just a gatekeeper themselves, and they're trying to determine what content is going to educate or entertain or delight their audience. And they're trying to decide what to filter through and how to best write that content and share it with them. And so, when people come to me and they say, we have a new business and we just launched, and, here's our release, and it's maybe it's around a product. So it's a product launch press release, and here's a bunch of features, and here's a link to the page to buy and learn more. And it's really hard for anybody to write a story around that. So I usually, give it back to them and say, I imagine people use this. And they go, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, beta testers, you've had people try this out. Oh yeah, we had lots of people. They had great experiences. I'm like, share at least one, pick someone, what their obstacle was, what this product solved, what their outcome was, ideally with numbers if you can get it, and have a quote by them. And all of a sudden, that's more of a story arc, more elements for a journalist. So, taking that into account, what is it that you're releasing? What is it that you're talking about? And, how can that, be beefed up with elements that would make it more likely to follow a story arc? Sometimes, um, I talked about, the human interest element, getting that immediate empathy, what your story is. And, sometimes that in and of itself is not strong enough, uh, you know, for an article, but it could be, an element. And so maybe you're talking about something that's, going on right now in the world. People dealing with, uh, I don't know, work culture issues, these hybrids of people wanting you in the office, people wanting to stay and work from home. And, there's things there. And so maybe an art press release that focuses on the psychology and the mental health behind that situation of push and pull between employers and employees, and then also sharing that you deal with this in your practice, and this is what brought you, what your story was to get you into this vocation. And so that's sort of the way in which you can sort of layer it and have some of those elements that would allow a journalist to have more layers to work with for building out a story arc.
Mm. Now, when you say story arc, I think of there's like story brand. There's all sorts of kind of discussions around like Joseph Campbell's story, like kind of hero's journey. How much of that do you need to put into these story arcs, or like do you need to have kind of who's the villain in this, who's overcoming, who's the guide, like all the classic Joseph Campbell type of stuff, or is it just kind of beginning, middle, end? Where did you start? Where
Yeah,
you're now? Where
it's
you
as
headed?
simple as beginning, middle, end. It doesn't have to be, like the Star Wars hero journey or anything like that. It doesn't. However, you can borrow from those things. So, this can be really great tools, and a lot of people have different ways of working with story. But for me, it's just having that beginning, middle, and end that you've taken someone on a small journey of some sort, whether it's just identifying a problem, solving it, and what the outcome is for someone, or identifying a possible outcome for someone. And those are important because I think that a lot of people naturally, if you look at how good articles are written, like Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, they generally have elements of that in there. And I do think that that's important. And it gets people away from this, uh, you know, uh, here's what we have and here's a list of features. And, just sort of think about what are things you could go back in and create more, I guess, paths or journeys. In some cases, you can't, and or you're really just finding difficulty. Are there ways to go back in and inject things that show the stakes? For example, if you talk about a pain point of loneliness, what's the stakes for that? Is it the amount of people that take their lives each year? Is it the amount of people that suffer to the point that they have to get help or go into inpatient care? Those are data points and numbers that are out there that you can put into your messaging to show what the stakes are if this isn't addressed. And that's a powerful thing that journalists respect and like, is having numbers and showing what the stakes are. And so you don't have to have your own numbers. There's a lot of publicly available data out there, and you're welcome to use it and plug it in and make it really define what the stakes are for a particular issue that you're writing about.
Mhm. Now, I know for like when I launched Thursday as the new Friday, I worked with a PR company. They got me some great national media. It's how I connected with Simon Sinek and got in Money and Harvard Business Review, all these things that I never could have done on my own. When does it make sense for a growing private practice to start looking at professional PR, professional press releases, taking that outside of their own team and working with someone like yourself to level up in a different way? Like, what should they think through? Like, what kind of goals should they have that it makes sense to go more national?
Right. So I think the biggest thing when it, looking to go national is, are you comfortable being a thought leader and an expert? You know, you don't have to be on video. You don't have to be interviewed for radio and stuff like that. But, you have to be comfortable being out there. And, it could just be being comfortable having, being quoted in a lot of different articles and things like that. Some people aren't. Some people are naturally want to sit back and hide behind the company name or something like that. So I think you really have to be comfortable with that. But if you are, and you really want to invest in sort of, establishing yourself as an expert, a thought leader in your space, I think that, doing little efforts towards PR and media is a natural evolution. I don't necessarily recommend that someone go out and hire a PR firm. I don't know what you paid for a PR firm, but they're generally pretty expensive. And, if you have a plan and you have an outcome of how to monetize it, then, maybe you could make that investment. But I think that baby steps would be better, like maybe doing a few press releases and, writing a release or having one written and then sending it out to the media. Uh, you know, uh, Picking topics or things that are more strategic. And one is we've talked about your story and stuff like that. So incorporating that into an announcement, maybe it's not the lead, but there's something else there that you're talking about. Maybe. Maybe it's researching your industry and talking about sort of blind spots, things that aren't really addressed in traditional mental health, and maybe bringing those to light. Those did do really well in specifically people who cover that industry, trade publications, newspapers who have people who really cover, mental health practice and things like that. They really respond when people talk about what I call these gaps and blind spots. And so, what is it that people aren't really addressing? Maybe there's something post pandemic that some people may have sort of gossiped about or talked in the community, but maybe it just hasn't been in a lot of publications yet. And so you, by sending out a press release, are basically saying, here, let's now put it in print and talk about it. And those do really well. I did one for a carpet company in New Jersey, talking about the blind spot being how bad the big box home improvement stores is for the carpet industry. And they got picked up over a dozen trade publications, and they ended up getting published in their newspaper and New Jersey Magazine. So they got a local stories as well. But it just went really well. And I can't think of a more non-newsworthy type of business, but even there, you can flesh out opportunities. And one of them is just, what is it that when you go to a conference, people talk about? And the reason you talk about it is because you never see people writing about it in print. And maybe those are opportunities that you should bring to light and get, put on the page. And often you can be that person who pushes that forefront and talks about it. And then, you own it. In the case of that carpet company, we continue to talk about that in subsequent press releases. And at the end of a year, they had over 30 articles that had been written about them, mostly in the trade publications, but also in their local newspaper, as well as that New Jersey Magazine. In their case, they were able to take all those clippings of the trade publications, and none of their customers are ever going to read those magazines, but they put it together in what they called a brag book. And every time that they introduce themselves to a new customer who wants a quote, they just show them that. And by adding that to the sales consultation, they started closing sales at a 17% improvement. And, the same thing happens when you get media attention and articles. It's like, there's so much credibility and social proof when someone writes about you. Put that on your website, share it with your leads. People who see that will feel very comfortable that you're someone that they want to consider working with.
Yeah, I mean that's so true. Like, back in May, a chapter in the recent Harvard Business Review book, um, they included an article I wrote for HBR, and so now to be in an airport and like see a chapter that I wrote, like that's gives such validity, and just shows that there's other people out there that trust the message that we at Practice the Practice are putting forth. And so the more that people can, even if it's super small scale, where they're a solo practice owner, if you're quoted in your state's big paper, like for us, the Detroit Free Press, for example, that would be a really big deal for any private practice owner. And there's so few people that are actively reaching out to like those kind of local and regional media, that I feel like that was one thing that really shocked me when I reached out to a local talk radio person. I said, "Do you have like a call-in therapist? I'm sure you do." And they're like, "No, we've wanted one." And so someone from my practice, it wasn't always me, came in once a week and did call-in therapy type of questions. We weren't doing therapy on the phone, but it was just, we'd have a topic and it was in their specialty. And so it just is amazing to me how really there's so many opportunities out there. Before I get into the last question that I have, Mickie, I would love to know your thoughts on AI, how you think people can use that to save time and money. Also, maybe some of the dangers or areas that AI isn't yet at, to be able to help with some of this marketing and press releases.
Right. So I think that when it comes to press releases and PR and pitching, I think AI is great because you're never pitching the finished product. So if you just can't come up with the words, you have a pitch idea and you need to send 3 or 4 sentences to a local media, you know, play with AI and say, hey, this is kind of what I'm wanting to do. How would you pitch this in, 3 sentences? And then, what kind of quote would you recommend here? Now, here is where you can take their quote, but I would go in and play with it. I would make it more powerful and stronger. I find that the quotes that I get out of AI are not generally solid, amazing quotes, but, pump it up, massage it. The same thing with press releases. I have gotten some really good press releases out of AI. If writing is not your thing, then feel free to lean on it. What I've never gotten good from AI is a good idea for a press release.
Mm,
If I just say, "Hey, I have a new startup, and this is our company. Here's some background information. Write a press release," you're going to get a really general launch type press release that is not going to be meaningful or strategic. So what I do is I usually come in knowing what I want, like that little human interest nag. If I know it's not the lead, I want it in there though, like maybe in the third paragraph. So I would approach AI and say, hey, I'm writing a press release on this subject. I want to include this in the third paragraph. How else would you structure this press release to be the most strategic? Have it explain to you what it wants to outline and create a structure. Often AI is better at telling you what great structure is and then not following it themselves. If you tell it to write a press release, it wouldn't follow. It would not have followed that structure that it just told you if you asked me structure paragraph by paragraph how you would attack this press release. So ask it specific questions, kind of know what you're wanting it to write about from the beginning. That's 100% you have to do that. You can brainstorm with it with ideas and stuff like that, but I always feel like go in there knowing strategically what you want out of it. And sometimes then you may have to ask to write it paragraph by paragraph. But at the end of it, I found that I usually walk away with a pretty good press release. If you're dealing with numbers and data and things like that, you want to check it. I think that now you can ask for it to cite any sources, but what I find is it lies. It lies a lot. So really,
mm,
make sure what it's saying is logical. Make sure that the numbers align with what's out there. You can also just ask it for, okay, now we have this press release. In the first paragraph, I talk about this aspect of maybe divorce and breakups. Can you provide me 10 options for a data point to reinforce that, and also cite the source? And I do stuff like that. I punish my AI. I say, give me 20 options for a headline. Okay, that was a great first paragraph. Now give me 5 different options for an opening paragraph. and just play with it until I get something that's kind of strong. And usually in less than half an hour, I can walk away with what I feel is a pretty solid press release. So I do lean on it. I do believe playing with it. I do believe breaking it off piecemeal and maybe approaching it piece by piece, you're going to get a better outcome. And then don't be afraid of going back and say, hey, rewrite this third paragraph, but incorporate more elements of, my story and human interest elements. And you could actually just say, here's my story about what attracted me to therapy. Craft sort of some elements of how this is it could be an inspirational story or a story that shows the hero journey, and have it build it out and play with it. And then after a while, you can sort of come away with a 2 or 3 sentence that you can recycle again and again. Maybe it even becomes part of your boilerplate, or what we call the about section that's usually at the end of a press release that you can put on all subsequent press releases. But I think AI is perfect because at the end of the day, we're not writing the finished article. The journalist is. So I don't, I would always worry about having a blog post written by AI and putting it on my website because there's a feeling of authorship there. But with press releases, we're not really holding the copyright, and we're hoping that anybody uses it as fodder or content to turn into an article. So I feel like using AI content is fine. But just don't be afraid to punish it and have it tackle stuff bit by bit, and just asking, how would you structure this? How would you structure this and incorporate this human interest element? And I want to get it in there by the third paragraph, and just play with it, and don't be afraid to go in there and rewrite and attack paragraph by paragraph until you get something that's really nice. And often, I do it, so I've done it a lot. My half hour might be an hour to an hour and a half with you, but really putting that extra work in there can really make a huge difference.
So awesome. The last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I think that when it comes to getting media attention, being unknown or really small is not necessarily an obstacle. Journalists often get their best accolades for bringing up resources and people that their audience does not know. Journalists often do not get applauded for reviewing the latest Microsoft Office suite. It is usually a small esoteric tool. It might be a product that a mom and pop has. And it also might be, a local practice, professional that doesn't have a huge reputation in the area, might be new to getting media attention. And so don't be afraid. This space is available for anyone who wants to claim it. And that applies to the local media market as well as the national media market as well.
So awesome. Mickie, if people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, where should we send them?
So my website is ereleases.com. And I do think a great place for anybody who's considering PR, you can start at this free video masterclass I have. It's at ereleases.com/plan, and that's PLAN. And it's completely free. It's less than an hour long video because, the last time I bought a course, it was like 14 hours and I never finished it. So it really will walk you through the actionable strategic types of releases that are working right now. And if you sort of run through your practice and through this series of ideas, you should be able to brainstorm half a dozen types of potential press releases that you could do that would more likely give you pickup as opposed to those types of releases that we see every day that just sort of fall flat.
Well, Mickie, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Makes me want to go get some press releases out there to start the process and, just think differently about how we are promoting Practice of the Practice and supporting therapists to build thriving practices that address the mental health crisis. So gives me a lot to think about. Doing a daily podcast now, I'm getting all these ideas and this information that I'm sure the team is like, all right, Joe, simmer down a little bit. it's, make sure you're tuning in because, every day now we are releasing a podcast. And we couldn't do this without our amazing sponsors. Today's sponsor is Alma. Alma is so awesome. They help clinicians to build a rewarding private practice with simplified insurance credentialing in under 45 days, enhanced reimbursement rates. You're going to get paid more and guaranteed 2-week paybacks. That's insane. So even if your insurance isn't typically paying that quickly, Alma floats it. They make sure you get paid every 2 weeks. So you can read more over at helloalma.com/Joe. Again, that's helloalma.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.